anxiety loves to be told that it's doing a great job and that it's right and it's helping you to be successful and to get that pat on the back and all of that. So it's kind of creates a nasty cycle where you get in a loop of listening to the anxiety kind of telling you that it's right and that you need to listen to it in order to do your job as a mom, to be the best mom, to be the best, person in your job, to be the best friend, the best partner, all of these things. And you oftentimes will feel like, okay, I'm going to listen to it because I'm doing the best I can. And obviously it must be helping me in some way because it's pretty loud.
Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventure mom and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I am so excited to have you here with me today. And before we dive into our topic, I just want you to start by giving us an intro to who you are and what you do.
I am excited to be here, honored to be here. This is so fun for me. I am Dr. Carolyn Rubenstein. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Florida. So I have a private practice and I see clients within all of Florida, primarily looking at issues of anxiety, perfectionism, and burnout. So those are my kind of main areas of focus. And I also spend a lot of time on Instagram and for myself personally, and also just sharing content and love talking to people in this way where it's more informal because you can only do so much in one-on-one sessions. So I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you here. So our topic today is high functioning anxiety and perfectionism. So let's just start right out of the gate. Like, what is high functioning anxiety?
Yeah, it is. It's such an interesting term because it's not actually like a clinical term that you learn as a psychologist. It's not in our diagnostic manual.
Yeah.
It's not a subtype of anxiety, but it is something that is very helpful to understand because it can be missed oftentimes because it's kind of like a hidden anxiety. And so high functioning anxiety is really kind of the person is experiencing normal signs of anxiety, worry, overthinking, kind of the physical symptoms, such as difficulty with sleep, stomach issues, all the stuff that you would see with anxiety, but they're so able to cover it up and use it in a way many times that allows them to be successful in certain areas, or to receive praise for certain things. And so it gets reinforced in a way that anxiety loves. Anxiety loves to be told that it's doing a great job and that it's right and it's helping you to be successful and to get that pat on the back and all of that. So it's kind of creates a nasty cycle where you get in a loop of listening to the anxiety kind of telling you that it's right and that you need to listen to it in order to do your job as a mom, to be the best mom, to be the best, person in your job, to be the best friend, the best partner, all of these things. And you oftentimes will feel like, okay, I'm going to listen to it because I'm doing the best I can. And obviously it must be helping me in some way because it's pretty loud. And so it creates a cycle, but many times people wouldn't know by looking at you that you can appear. So right now I'm doing this podcast. I'm anxious. I'm totally anxious, right? This is not my comfort zone. Like put me in a therapy session, in a trauma case, not anxious at all. I'm in my comfort zone. This for me though, right. I'm anxious and it's because it's new, it's unknown. And my anxiety is telling me to, I don't know enough or whatever. And so to come up with all this information and, whatnot. And I'll kind of throughout this talk about how to challenge that and kind of how I even challenge that with preparing for this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Of what that might look like if you listen to high functioning anxiety versus not listening to the high functioning anxiety. But
Yeah.
we'll dive into that.
I'm so glad that you said that you're anxious because I think oftentimes, especially in situations where we're outside of our comfort zone, like it's totally
Yeah.
natural to feel anxious and it makes sense
Right.
that we would feel anxious.
Right.
So I think something that you hit on is probably something that many people can relate to is that when you struggle with high functioning anxiety, you often either may not even recognize it or know that this is something that you're dealing with, or it's something that you're covering up and you know that it exists, but like somehow it's just driving you and like you said, you think that it's sort of helping you.
Right.
So what are some just like general signs that high functioning anxiety is popping up? Like how can you even recognize it?
I think that especially with high functioning anxiety, like one of the best cues for me, I'm a thinker, and many people who have high functioning anxiety are in their heads a lot, right? We're anxious, we're in our heads. One of the best cues to kind of bypass that is to look at your body, right? Look
Mm,
at how your body is responding. Do you have butterflies? Is your stomach a little jittery? Are you having like, is your, are you noticing like sleep issues for more like kind of with bigger issues? Is your sleep changing? Are you feeling stress like in your neck or kind of in certain areas? Everyone has those certain areas that you'll start to feel it. And so getting connected to your body and using your body is almost like a compass to know like, all right, there it goes. Like I feel those butterflies, which means there's some anxiety popping up, and kind of using that to bypass like going into the brain and trying to take out all of those thoughts that are racing through and getting lost. And then, versus just being like, okay, I'm going to bypass that whole route and look at the body, because oftentimes you'll see signs in your body.
yeah, so true. So I think, I definitely struggled with a little bit of this specifically to like my workplace and just my job and being in school and like always putting this pressure on myself that like I had to do really well and I definitely hit it and I didn't like want people to know. Everyone saw me as a top performer and like that I totally was functioning as a quote normal human being, but like I
Yes.
had so much anxiety. And so I'm curious, I think it can be helpful to sort of highlight what can it look like to other people versus what might be actually going on with you, because I think other people can sometimes see it and like we see these certain behaviors and we're like,
Right.
"Oh, that looks familiar."
Yeah, totally. And I think that's also kind of like why personally, like even like on Instagram and even in my private practice, like I will be very upfront and open and vulnerable and share, because I'm not the picture of someone like I can appear confident and composed. And so that's, like you appear like you have it together,
Yeah.
right? That you are totally comfortable and all of that. So by saying like I'm anxious, you're like, oh, okay, you can be both. You can be kind of appear a certain way, but still have that. And so I'm going to kind of go back to what you were answering. But I think for me, that's why I do that, is also for myself, but also to try to break down that illusion of like, just because you can like appear a certain way, that doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid,
Mm,
right? Because they are. And I don't want that for anyone to feel like just because people don't see it, it's not valid.
yeah.
So for high functioning anxiety, what it might look like to others, very detail oriented, right? You dot your I's, you cross your T's, your emails are perfectly composed, you've got everything together, you've got your plans, your schedules, all of that. You're very detail oriented.
Yeah.
You are someone who says yes a lot. You're very loyal to people, pretty reliable, right? Hardworking. You're always there. You know, very, very hardworking. You're not a slacker to others. People don't see that. Um, you can appear very outgoing, and with the detail oriented, pretty structured, right?
Yeah.
And pretty like planned and kind of have like a weekend agenda and like all of these things in that sense. But on the flip side, what they don't see is just as you are detail oriented, you're also spending a lot of time in your head, over planning and overthinking, right? Just as you are structured and kind of creating these agendas, you may be a little bit inflexible, which can be hard. Just as you're loyal, you might have issues with boundaries, saying no. Just as you are hardworking, it might be you have a huge fear of failure. And so kind of want to stay on that wheel. And outgoing and, that sign might be a sign of wanting to please others more so than yourself. And so it can appear one way, but what's actually going on inside might be a deeper source of discomfort or desire. And not all these things are bad, right? It's not bad to want to make someone happy, or to want to, or to have or be scared of failing. Like that's normal, right? Who wants to fail? Like, so it's not all of these things are bad, and not all of these things are associated with the flip side of this. So it's not an all or nothing situation, but if you're noticing patterns of this, then that's when you kind of begin to look and see.
Yeah. So a little bit before we jumped on to the interview, you sort of alluded that this might be something that you have struggled with yourself. And I know just within like your work, and it seems like you have a lot going on, of course. What, if you don't mind sharing, what did this look like for you personally?
I mean, I think I still have it. I run anxious. Like I'm an anxious human. I don't see it as a bad thing for me though, because I don't let it run my life. It does not dictate what I do. So it's like an accessory that I have, and I just kind of have it with me. And it sometimes is louder than others. In the past, it was incredibly loud. And it kind of helped me to achieve really big things, and great success and all of that. But not really for the right reasons, right? More so from a place of anxiety than a true deep desire that like, this is what I want and these are my values. And from that deep core place versus like anxiety is telling me that in order to please that person, I need to work 24/7 on this project. So I'll just neglect my sleep and my eating. Totally fine. It's totally fine to neglect that. So I wasn't noticing though that it was coming from a place of anxiety, right? It was just like, I'm getting great results and, keep going until you kind of realize like, this isn't fun. Like, this isn't enjoyable. Like, you're getting these results, you're getting these great things, you're not enjoying it. Leads to burnout. This is just like not a good formula. It's an endless cycle. But you can have anxiety, you can have those feelings, you can have those thoughts. They can be there, and you don't have to listen to what they're telling you to do. Right? That it's telling you for this podcast, for example, that like I knew the topic and some general things that I could spend in the past 3 hours, prepping and being like, all the latest research, here are your stats. Like, did you know that X, Y, and Z said this in this report 3 weeks ago? And all of that, I could totally, that would be me listening to the anxiety of wanting to appear that I have all of this knowledge and, that I have to have it all put together and all done. But what I realized was through a lot of kind of having to challenge the anxiety and not do what it's telling me is that when I drop that, it's, I connect more with people, and like you're actually able to like, people listen, people connect, people hear. They don't want to hear like all this detail and knowledge and fakeness and what my anxiety wants people to hear, but more so just like raw human, whatever is there. And it's trusting that you have enough to share, like just you as a human at this point. If someone's asking you to be on a podcast on a topic, like, let's see where it goes. Like, let's just talk about it, right? I might not know everything, and that's okay.
Right.
Like, you know, like that is
Yeah.
totally okay.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty because I think that it's so important and I know many people will be able to relate to it. And I'm so glad to hear you say that, these are still things that you might struggle with, but now the
Mhm.
difference is you don't allow them to dictate your behaviors. And I think
Right.
that is so important because like I identified that I was a yes person and saying yes to every project, everything. I never wanted to let people down, but it wasn't more so for the other people. It was more so for me. Like I didn't
Mhm.
want to let myself down. And I always
Mhm.
thought, I have to do this. I have to say yes. I'm going to be the best at this. And I'm going to, get that promotion. I'm going to do that thing. And like
Yeah.
the burnout was beyond. And yeah, it's funny because one of the next things that I wanted to sort of dive into, and you alluded to it, was it ultimately affecting your relationships. Because I think a lot of it, you do start to lose a genuine connection with people and
Yeah.
also just to the things that you're putting your energy into because it's like you're constantly like pushing yourself, but not in a healthy way. So,
Right.
how can it affect your relationships?
Well, I think that's a huge one. I honestly think that being a therapist has been one of the biggest like teachers for me because if I show up in the room, which I did as an early clinician with like this plan of like, this is what we're going to do today. And like, let me explain to you what this disorder means. And that is such a disservice. That's just creating a
Mm,
disconnection. And instead, what I learned was you just drop all of that. You show up as human beings, right? I went to training. I have all that knowledge. I can drop that information if necessary or look it up and bring it in and all of that. But at the core, beyond everything else, like focus on connection. And beyond that, everything else is you can Google. You
right,
know,
right.
like beyond everything else, you can Google all of that. And I think that at some point, anxiety can impair your ability to connect with someone, to be vulnerable, to be honest, because you're so in your head. You're so
Yeah,
scared of being seen as imperfect or being seen as, oh, she doesn't have it all together or whatnot, and
right.
so yeah, I think being able to own that, and it's a journey to be okay with that, but it is refreshing, and it's also, at least for me, it's what I admire in the people that I connect the most with,
Yeah,
is when it's not them telling me knowledge or information or like, did you know this specific fact? It's more so me just learning about them as a person and then being willing to connect and open up to me.
yeah,
The biggest thing. And so I see that in relationships, it can create walls of kind of being in your head. It creates, like, if you're saying yes to everything, like you're definitely lacking boundaries, but you're also setting yourself up to being very let down, because when people don't reciprocate in that way, it doesn't feel very good, right? When you burn out and people aren't saying like, let me take over and do all of that, just like maybe you would have done for someone else,
right.
you're very hurt. And so it kind of can set up a huge imbalance in relationships. Can also lead to, if anxiety is there, to like needing a lot of reassurance, which isn't really a good thing in relationships, of like, okay, like you're okay with everything I'm doing, right? Like everything's good. Like you're happy with me. And an hour later, oh, that was good, right? Like I didn't do anything wrong. Like that's okay.
Right.
Or if someone gets frustrated with you and you're not pleasing them, that the relationship is over. No, relationships have ups and downs and twists and turns and all of
Yeah,
that. It doesn't mean that it's, over, and it's getting comfortable with sometimes the unknown, which anxiety does not enjoy.
right.
Yeah.
That
I
seems
know.
like what we always come back to is like, it
Mhm.
wanting certainty and it wanting to have things all figured out. So I'm curious because I'm sitting here thinking and I'm trying to think back to, when I was struggling with some of this and just thinking about like the why, like why might this become a problem? Like why might somebody struggle with high functioning anxiety? Like are there like some key reasons why?
Oh yeah, I mean, because the rewards, right? You
Mm,
get reinforced. It's so people, I mean, just think about school and how when kids are in school, like you get points off if you're not detail oriented, if you don't capitalize, if you don't put a period, if you don't dot your I, and if you do everything perfectly, you get a star, you get a sticker, so all of this is very much reinforced from a very young age, and can be very, addicting, to, I want that sticker. I want them to say that I'm really good at this. I want to hear all of that. That feels good. And then you don't realize when it gets too much and too far. And when there are no more gold stickers and you're like,
right.
well, what am I doing now? And then you just go buy yourself some gold stickers and give yourself that.
I love that. No, that is so interesting because I was thinking about it and I'm like, that makes sense. I mean, what you just said makes total sense. And I think as an adult, it's the same, right? Like I've worked in healthcare for over 15 years and it's that continuous ladder of that, you do this and it's going to bring you to the next step and you'll get more recognition and potentially more money and like all this shiny objects that ultimately led to me feeling like, okay, like I can't do one more thing for somebody else because I am not even who I am anymore at the core. And so I think it can be obviously hugely draining on, not just your day-to-day life, but who you are as a person. And so what are the ways that you can start to challenge some of these things, like the thoughts that creep in with high functioning anxiety? What are some ways that you can start challenging those thoughts?
I think step one is like first, obviously, which seems obvious, but it's not. It's like recognizing that they're there. Like when they come up, it's like taking a flashlight and like shining it on it and seeing it. That's hugely important because oftentimes they're just operating under the surface in secret and we don't even know, like, why am I feeling this way? Right. And so being able to name the thought, name what is going on. Like I'm doing this because I'm afraid that they're not going to like me if I say no, to that invitation or whatnot. And it kind of recognizing what is coming up, what that thought is, so that it's not under the surface. And that might be just writing it down, jotting it down, getting it. Because once you actually see it or say it out loud, it doesn't feel as huge anymore. And you're like, oh, that's what's causing me all of this. Okay. Like I can work with that versus the scary monster feeling in my head. And also recognizing thoughts is just thoughts, right? They're just thoughts. Like they're nothing more. It's what you do with them. So you get to decide what you do with this thought and how much power you give to it. So first recognizing that you have thoughts and what they are, but also noticing that they're just thoughts. That's it. Nothing else. We have like, I think 6,000 or more a day. A lot of thoughts. So if we gave them all that much power, we would be completely paralyzed, which can happen. And I think also kind of these thoughts are coming with a lot of pain. And so usually discomfort. So approaching yourself with compassion, like, okay, this is hard, right? This is hard. This kind of sucks, or I'm struggling with this, or this is scary. I don't like this feeling. And saying like validating for yourself that this is a struggle, because we don't do that. We kind of get upset with ourselves for feeling this way. We don't need to. So I think being able to be like, all right, I have this thought. It doesn't feel good. I don't feel good about this. It's icky. And then really beginning to challenge the thought by what I said, like what I do, which is your action, right? Like you can follow it. You can do what it's telling you, which is like, you know what? I'm going to say yes because I believe this thought wholeheartedly and I just want to let the anxiety go away. And you know what? If you do that sometimes, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Let yourself off the hook. Or you could say, you know what? Today, I'm going to try saying no. I'm going to try saying no and see what happens, see how I feel. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel uncomfortable when you start trying. So don't feel like it's going to get like immediately better. It's slightly beginning to starting to challenge and to kind of take your own path and say, okay, anxiety is telling me to do this, but what do I actually want to do? And am I willing to do that? and keeping track of it, like keeping like a note log in your phone or something so that you can track your wins here of things that you are like doing for you that maybe anxiety told me to do this and I did this instead. Because it's really powerful to see that your whole world doesn't fall apart, because our brain tells us that our whole world is going to fall apart. So I think those would be the key, is just recognize it, but take back the power. Take back the power in what you do. And regardless of what you do, just be nice to yourself, because it's a struggle either way. It's a struggle if you say yes, it's a struggle if you say no. So recognizing that it's hard, it's hard.
Oh, I love those. Those were so good. Like, I think those are honestly like the pillars. And I'm so glad that you said, sometimes you're not going to get it right. You're not going to have the most helpful response. And it's not even like about getting it right, right? Like,
No.
decisions are decisions. Sometimes we make helpful ones, sometimes we make
Right.
unhelpful ones, but like,
Right.
you'll get another shot. And like,
Totally.
self-compassion is so huge, because I
Yeah.
think like along with high functioning anxiety, you are oftentimes beating yourself up. Like, you're oftentimes telling yourself, you're not doing a good enough job. Like, you
Yeah.
did XYZ last time. Like, you're not doing that this time. Like, why? Like,
Yeah.
you need to do better. It's like stopping to just acknowledge that you're even doing it. Like you said, with your thoughts, it
Yeah.
seems so basic and silly, but it's like, we often forget that. Like,
We forget. We don't notice it and we don't recognize it. And if someone's just starting, like I honestly recommend like starting with like once a week you try to like challenge it. But like most of the time it's not like, don't be like, okay, no more. I'm saying no to everything. No
right.
more detail oriented, throwing out all my planners. Like, here we go. Don't I don't want anyone to come away with it like that, because that would be going in the deep end, which is some
Yeah.
people are all for that. I'm all about baby steps, where it's like, you know what, this week I'm going to try maybe challenging it one time and seeing what happens. Next week I might try 2 times and see what happens. And keeping kind of a little thing and be like, oh, this is kind of fun. But also, if you don't let yourself do it in huge doses, it almost becomes a little exciting about like, what am I going to challenge this week? Like, what ways can I look for to challenge?
Yeah, it's so good. I'm so glad that you said that, because you don't throw yourself into the deep end.
No.
I know for me, like, I was a list person. I used to be, and it's like semi-comical, but my husband like kind of hates that I went the complete opposite way. And now I'm like not a list person. I'm like, I don't plan. I feel better when I don't plan and have lists, but I used to be the list person, and I'd have, 10 things on my list. And my goal was, all right, I'm not going to do the 10 things. Like, the goal is not to do the 10 things. The goal today is I'm just going to do these 4 things. And that's going to be like a big accomplishment. And that was for me super helpful, because it started to break down that mentality of like, if you don't do all of the things, you didn't do a good job. It's like, well, instead I did those 4 things and I actually hit it out of the park, and I don't feel like I am completely drained and not wanting to do anything that's on the list anyway.
Yeah. And it's so powerful, right? And I think if you are a list person, like I am a list person. I love my list. No one's ever taking my list away from me. I literally, you're saying, no one can see this, but like I must have like 10,000. I'm a list person, okay? Not digital though. It has to like be all like written. But I lost my train of thought there, but I did have an idea. Oh, I created a list when I was first challenged, and I actually will still do this when I feel very overwhelmed. Will be like, okay, this is my list. I'm going to challenge myself. Things I'm not going to do. Like my not do list of like, okay, what on here, like, am I just willing to let go of? But knowing it's on a list kind of like gives me a sense of security that like, all right, I didn't just throw it away, but I'm also giving myself permission not to do it, which feels good. Which feels good. And sometimes, I will recommend to some people that will struggle with perfectionism, like, you know what, if you're really scared and you create this not to do list and you kind of keep it going, put a note in your calendar, because you're a list person, in 1 month or whatever, to come back and check out that list and see if there's anything burning on there. If there is, it's on that list. You can do it. It's not gone, but kind of let it go once you put it on there.
Yeah. I love that. It's like the small steps make the biggest impact sometimes. And it feels like it doesn't in the moment, of course, because you're like, how is this one silly little thing going to help me? But it like adds up and it immensely helps, especially over time, and just helps you to have, mindset shifts that are super healthy and helpful.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
are there some other like mindset shifts or actions that you would recommend if somebody's struggling with perfectionism or high functioning anxiety?
Yeah. I think it's a big one. So when I was reflecting on it this morning, right before I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, so I think first, I think it's so hard. I think perfectionism almost can be part of someone's personality in many ways. And so I don't know, for some people, I don't know if you ever really overcome it. Like at one point said I was a recovering perfectionist. I don't think I'm recovering. I don't think it's something that's ever going to like leave me. I don't know who it's a part, it's a part, but I don't listen to it a lot of the time. Like I'll just hear that little voice come up of like, oh, you should double check the spelling on that email before you send it. I'll be like, no, and I'll send it. And so instead, it's kind of just noticing for that. It's so hard though. I would also encourage looking at like what you asked before, like, okay, where did this perfectionism like come from? Because oftentimes it comes from a place where it's trying to do something good. It's trying to help you in some way. So without like pathologizing yourself and like shaming yourself, being like, okay, what was this trying to do for me at some point? Like in what like looking at it in like a good way, like what was it trying to do for me in a positive way? And then looking at, okay, so like thanking it for that. I think Marie Kondo and like her little like her whatever her I don't know what she calls her strategy, but you like before you like give away something, you thank it, right? You thank it for like whatever it did for you. And so it's almost like, okay, I'm gonna thank and like recognize what it has given me. And then also looking at, okay, in my life now, like what's it doing for me? What's it taking away? Like how is it hurting me possibly? How is it kind of like, what's the balance look like now? Is it doing as much good or is it hurting me more? And for most people, if they're struggling with it, it's causing a lot of issues. And so just being able to look at it head on can be really empowering and informative, because you don't really usually kind of open the hood of perfectionism to see what's underneath it, and being able to really recognize kind of like, okay, like let me look at this and see. And I think just exactly what I said before, beginning to challenge it in little ways, of noticing when it pops up, saying, hi to it, naming it, validating it. Like, I know you want to help me, but I don't really need you right now. And in the beginning, it's a lot of work because you do have to recognize it, consciously. It doesn't just happen. But eventually, with enough practice, it does become more automatic, where you just get like that little feeling and you're like, nope, not going to do anything with that. But in the beginning, it's a lot more effortful, where you kind of have to recognize, all right, perfectionism, I know that you want me to over prepare right now and spend 3 hours on this. And I hear you. I know you want to help me and you think you are. It might have helped in the past, but right now, I want you to sit right over there. Like you can sit right in that seat and like, I get it that you're here and you want to help me. I don't need you right this moment. So you sit there and I'll let you know if I need you. It's almost like a part of you that you don't want to beat up, because it's not coming from a place of wanting to hurt you. It really isn't. I don't believe it is. But I think it gets a little bit out of control if you don't tame it.
Yeah, that's so good. I love how you said sort of, kick it out of the driver's seat. And I say that a lot with anxiety, is like, it's okay for it to be there and be along for the ride, but it doesn't have to drive. Like just
right. It's like putting your kid in the driver's seat. Like we would all be like toast. Like you can't, right? Like I just think of it as like, I think about a lot of these things almost like my 4-year-old or something, who is really good intentions, but no, you can't jump off the cabinet, like or jump off the, like I know it seems really fun, it's exciting, but I promise you it's not. But if I change my mind, I will let you know. But for now, let's sit on the floor, not up there. And it's kind of like, it's not like the person's evil or it's an evil intention or anything like that. And I think it's also being able to recognize and approach yourself with that, because it makes it easier to work on these things if you're not constantly judging yourself, criticizing yourself, and approaching yourself. See, what I see a lot is people wanting to approach overcoming perfectionism and high functioning anxiety with high functioning anxiety and perfectionism. And that's why I'm all about, like, it's not going to be perfect. Like, I want you to mess up. Messing up is success here. Yeah. And so, like, anxiety with this, like, I don't want you to worry about doing it perfectly. Yeah. Like, don't do it perfectly. That's not the goal here.
Ugh, I'm so glad you said that, because I know that is a huge part of when you're working on something, especially something like perfectionism. You're like, okay, well, how can I do this the best? And when like the feelings creep in and you start to feel the overwhelm and you start to maybe reach back for old unhealthy habits, you're then like, oh my gosh, I just did that and I knew I shouldn't have done that. And then you go down the whole like beating yourself up path and it just goes off the rails.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so glad, you break it down into very simple and helpful steps. So if somebody is struggling with high functioning anxiety, is there one thing, just one thing, and it can be obviously something that we talked about, but one thing that you'd encourage somebody to do today?
Yes, I would say I would encourage not so much doing, but the message that you say to yourself. Yeah. This is hard. I'm struggling with this, right? I'm struggling with this. This is hard. I'm going to be okay. Yeah. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to move forward one step at a time. And it's a struggle, but I see it and it's okay. Yeah. I would say that it's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. And that's kind of just validating and naming what's going on and giving yourself some compassion and gentleness rather than kind of like punching yourself because of it.
Right. So good. I love it. So, Carolyn, if people want to find and connect with you further, get some of your helpful tips that you share on Instagram, where can people find you?
Yeah, I guess the easiest, you can go to my website, which is just my name, carolynrubenstein.com, or my Instagram, where I'm there all day, every day. I just hang out there. So it is my name, Carolyn Rubenstein, PhD. So a pretty long one, but hopefully there are no other ones of that. And everything else was taken. So.
Oh, yeah. We'll link to all of the links in the show notes so people can find you. And thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.